Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, it's draft weekend. Which Red Raiders are getting the Rod Roddy treatment and told to come on down? We're into it next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. In the flesh. Great to be back with you in the 806, back in God's country, Chris. Good to see you again. And I'm coming back on NFL Draft Day, and we will have an NFL draft-heavy episode and conversation to have here today as we look ahead to some Red Raiders that might be in the mix as we head into the weekend. We'll also gaze into the crystal ball a little further down the road as to what Red Raiders are on campus presently that we may be featuring in this conversation about a year from now. But always an exciting opportunity whenever you get to see some guys that you've gotten to know as college athletes, then with an opportunity to translate to the next level. So we'll be talking about certainly one of our favorites today in Dadrion Taylor Demerson. They call him Rabbit. I don't know if they'll put that on the jersey or not, but always a great time of year when you see some of these guys with an opportunity to essentially realize, their dreams. I know that playing college football at one point was probably a dream of theirs, but then you get to the next point, and this is the big picture dream is you hope to go pro, and some of them will be doing that this weekend.
Yeah, there are definitely levels to this. Like you want to be on a team? Do you want to, start on a team? You want to be the best player on a team, and all those different things. But it's I go back to like last year on this day. And what were we going through thinking you're going to have a guy go in the top 10 and you've got your head coach in Kansas City. You've got, several assistants in Kansas City, and just it was a big party for a guy like Tyree Wilson, and he would end up going, I think, number 7. And I mentioned this to you before we were doing the show, Cowan, that, we had 6 Big 12 first rounders last year. If you look, everywhere you look, and again, it doesn't take but one person to be picked somewhere different than what we thought, but there's a ton of mock drafts, tons of sources, tons of places to go read. Most are going to suggest, if not every, that you're not going to have a Big 12 player picked in the first round. I would ask the audience, hey, does that concern you? Do you go, I'm not worried about that? Doesn't matter? I don't know. Just asking the question aloud. Texas and Oklahoma may, in fact, have some players picked in the first round tonight. Tyler Guyton, offensive tackle out of Oklahoma, and then Xavier Worthy and Byron Murphy could be potential first rounders, and A.D. Mitchell, I guess, for Texas too. They could be potential first rounders. But other than that, your traditional Big 12 schools, and I say traditional with a wink because I'm even going to count like the Utahs and the Arizonas and all that. You're just not expected to have anybody picked in the first round. Doesn't mean that you won't. That's not necessarily the expectation. So anyway, I think that is somewhat fascinating. But we were feeling it at this point last year, man. You had the face of the Big 12 from a draft standpoint, and he was dinged up a bit, but he would go pick up the commissioner and bear hug him, and do things to Roger Goodell, to which Roger Goodell's back probably got aligned back into place at the time on stage in Kansas City. I think it's going to be interesting. You're going to be a bit of a wait now for the first Red Raider to be picked. And here's some of the names. Most people aren't going to know these guys, but here's some of the names that you see consensus could be late first round, second round ish. So potential for to have their name called tonight, or could be tomorrow night. But you got Jordan Morgan, who's offensive tackle at Arizona. Again, not in the Big 12 yet, but for all intents and purposes, they are. Kingsley Suamatia, the offensive lineman from BYU. He is the one related to CJ Ayu. Okay, like I think they're cousins or something, which CJ Ayu is a Red Raider assistant coach. You got Patrick Paul from University of Houston. You got Brandon Coleman from TCU. You got TJ Tampa, a corner from Iowa State. And you got Cooper Beebe, who's a guard at Kansas State. Those first four names are all offensive tackles, which I think is pretty fascinating. But that's kind of a glimpse of what you could see tonight. But I just go back to like last year and how much fun that was. And we'll get into, before we stop talking draft, we'll get into maybe who could be a big time pick for you that's on your current team. But yeah, we've got some guys that could have their names called in the next couple of days to talk about.
I was interested to see this week, the longest active first-round draft pick streaks. You got any guess as to who's number one on the list? Has had a consecutive first-rounder for the longest time?
This is Schools?
Yes.
Is it, okay, so my thought is going to want to say like the Alabama or Ohio State, but
Bingo.
I think it's – okay.
No, you nailed it right off the bat.
Okay.
The Alabama Crimson Tide, first round to you. You might say 15 consecutive years with a first-round draft pick. After that, Ohio State. He doesn't do this for fun, folks. He's a professional. First two guesses, correct. 8 years for Ohio State, about half of what Alabama's been cooking. Then you roll down the list, 6 consecutive years for Georgia, 5 consecutive years for Michigan. You got Florida, Oregon, USC with 4 consecutive years. Then a couple of curveballs thrown in with 2 consecutive years. Boston College, shout out to Boston College, Iowa, Pitt, Mississippi State, and the aforementioned Utes of Utah, working with back-to-back years there. But there are some blue bloods missing from that list, including the 2 that have left the Big 12 conference. But, you ask whether or not this is a problem or a concern. It would have to be, I guess, but in my opinion, as a longtime fan of a Big 12 program, it's not a new concern. Even with Texas and Oklahoma in the league, the Big 12 was always getting lapped as far as NFL talent. And it's not just the Big 12. The SEC has been NFL HQ for a considerable period of time. And hello, here's some rocket science. It's no wonder as to why they've got some tremendous success as far as the top of their league is concerned, right? And I also think that whenever you look nationally at some demographics as to where NFL players come from, the South is loaded. Just so happens to be the footprint that conference occupies, Chris. So there's some of those things that kind of go hand in hand. But this will be essentially, I guess, nothing new if you're a fan of a Big 12 program. It's always been kind of an uphill battle whenever you're talking about breaking into these top-level NFL conversations. And I don't expect that to change, really anytime soon. It may, as a matter of fact, just get more drastic as to the gap as you see some of these resources continue to grow in a monstrous way. And, from a Big Ten perspective, you get a couple of mentions there with Ohio State and Michigan, obviously. And I guess now we got to talk about like Oregon, classic Big Ten program. But, pretty top heavy. And then you've got the remainder of that league not really showing up on that list either. The next one is Iowa, who's got back-to-back seasons. That's 2. So I think it's kind of interesting to see how that breaks down. And I guess sometimes it might just be a wonder whenever the SEC doesn't run roughshod over everybody anyway, because that's where you've got typically the professional talent. And I would add somewhat of an asterisk or disclaimer, because professional talent, being there in mass doesn't always, now maybe it's 7 times out of 10, but not 10 times out of 10, equate to a great college team. There's a couple of those on that list that obviously have rosters that are filled with guys that are going to be professionals, especially when you're talking about, like Alabama or Georgia. But much like you would say with the Big Ten, there is a top-heavy portion of that category in those conferences. And then you've got other programs that are nowhere near that kind of conversation. So definitely you can see where there is a little bit of a difference between professional success or professional opportunity and making a great college football team. Now, if you're Alabama and you got 15 consecutive years of a first-round pick, yeah, that's going to go hand in hand with being a great college football team. But they're not always one and the same, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah, would I rather be Alabama? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Ohio State. Oh, yeah.
Nah, why? That's too easy. Why would we want it that easy?
But to be fair, you're right. They churn them out, and I think what's also interesting to note is we're talking about the Big 12 when the 6 picks last year. That's when you only had 10 teams. This year you have technically 14 teams. Although, I'm being goofy with the way this is working because you have 14 teams, but 2 of them are going to have potentially first-round picks, but they're not really Big 12 teams anymore.
No.
And so then obviously you balloon to 16 next year. So anyway, I don't know. It was worth pointing out. But you're right. There's no – although I think Joey would tell you I'd rather have – the more draft picks we get, that means the better we're recruiting, and that means the better we should be playing, and we should be getting results,
Sure.
And all those things. But let's go over a few of these guys that should have their name called.
First, today's episode brought to you by Monopoly Go. And we've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime of the big game, and the scoreboard's not looking too good. You're feeling low. You're not sure you or your team are going to be able to pull out a win. And that's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, it's time to get back in the game and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. And you can do just that with the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go. Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone, anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies and tell them all about it whenever you're kicking their butts. You can also play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with the wrecking ball, or charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go today for free in the App Store or on Google Play. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Never sweat buying tickets to your favorite events again with Gametime. It's always a breeze using the Gametime app where you're going to find the best last-minute deals. And I love being able to scout out a view from any seat before pulling the trigger. And of course, it's always at the lowest price, guaranteed. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it begins, which means you can finish off that last beer at the tailgate at your own pace, because Gametime is the place to find last-minute seats to any event. They give you the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets, but not just fast and easy, also secure and simple to use. So right now, download the Gametime app and create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today for last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed.
Let's go over a few of these guys that should have their name called. Because hey, don't we remember some of the commentary last year at the beginning of spring? It's like Miles Cole, Steve Linton could be first-round ends, and Steve Linton ends up transferring, and Miles Cole ends up playing an okay season and doesn't even play in your bowl game because he's going to go get ready for the draft, and I don't even know if you missed him in the bowl game. This stuff is hard. It's hard to project. It's very difficult to one, achieve success if you're a player, because there's so many good ones, and there's a lot of good ones with measurables. There's a lot of good ones with production, but it's got to kind of meet. And then there's like Pat Mahomes, who he doesn't have like all-world measurables, okay? He's not the biggest guy, strongest guy, fastest guy, but he's really freaking good. And I don't know, it's like he checks like 16 intangible boxes, plus he's got, strong arm, and he's got, decent size and all those things. But my point is to say is, even when we talk about these guys years ahead of time, it's hard. Like a guy like Miles Cole, prime example. I mean, 6'7", 285. He's exactly, if you came out of a lab and be like, yep, that's what a defensive end's supposed to look like right there. Slightly bigger than Tyree Wilson, all that. But Tyree, there's a lot more quick twitch and production and all those things that went with Tyree Wilson. And so one's going to go in the first round and one's going to go in the 5th, 6th, 7th. I mean, think about it. I think Tyree Wilson in his last season here had 3 or 4 more sacks that year than Miles Cole did in his entire career. I just start off with him in that he's going to be a name that I think gets picked. But Rabbit is going to be the one that my favorite saying when Rabbit walked up to me and be like, "It ain't no fun when Rabbit's got the gun." I'm like, God, I love you, kid, man. You are just the freaking best, man.
I want you to be my son.
Yeah, he is the easiest kid to root for, and in my opinion, the most difficult guy to replace off of last year's team because of
really put him at number one.
The intangibles boxes, man. I just those guys are hard to find. And yeah, you're like Jacob Rodriguez's, your Bryce Ramirez's. Some of those folks can but it's like, you're going to see your secondary make some mistakes, misalignment, missed a coverage, missed a call, whatever. And Rabbit fixed a lot of that. Like I just, and again, I mean, when the Senior Bowl folks last year in say September are rolling through each facility and they're talking to the whole team. Like, here's our expectations, folks. If you want to get picked, you want to play professional football, here's kind of what you need to do. And they start watching practice film. And then the guy puts up their practice film of Texas Tech, which they're all a part of. And he's like, you want to go to the NFL? You want to get invited to the Senior Bowl? You want to do these things? Play like this guy. Who do they show film of? Dadrian Taylor Demerson, because he is all over the dang place. On a Tuesday afternoon, on a Saturday afternoon, he plays fast. He plays violent. He's smart. And so I think it'll be we're talking first round tonight, obviously, but he's not going to get called until late Friday, early Saturday is kind of 3rd, 4th round range, I think, is kind of where you're looking for Rabbit. And then you got Tyler Owens. Had he been healthy enough to run that 40 at the combine, maybe this would have been a bit different, but I think he's kind of nursed that, which has been his problem all along, is just availability. But his ability on special teams, his speed when he can show it, his measurables and range and all those things, versatility, somebody may, in fact, pick him 5th, 6th, 7th round as well.
Yeah, Rabbit has been the guy, I guess, that pretty consistently has been featured, for whatever it's worth, mock draft-wise, among the top 100. So kind of gauging where that may wind up as you get into Friday and Saturday. And I don't know, Chris, there's really no way, I guess, to make a list like this or compare and contrast all across the country. But I think Rabbit would have to be on the short list of those who, since their season ended, has most improved their draft stock. Because
point.
It seems like every time he's had an opportunity to showcase himself, and not just, on the field or in a 40-yard dash or a shuttle drill. I don't know what all they do, Red Rover. But an interview room. All those things. You just hear about him time and time again as folks coming away very, very impressed with him. So I don't know who else would even be in that category, because I'm not paying attention to everybody else who's had guys that have been risers since the season has left. But I think he'd have to be on the short list of those who have made the most hay since the season actually ended, as far as improving his stock is concerned.
Yeah, and you're right. I don't have a great context of nationally, but there's no doubt that he has enhanced his situation because Senior Bowl crushed it, bowl game crushed it, combine crushed it. I think it's just like the chatter amongst draft circles, which is I never know whether to put a ton of stock in some of this stuff, but there's so many people that cover the draft for a living. They just do. It's like this cottage industry that people cover it all year round. And there's so many Twitter accounts. There's so many mocks. There's so many sites you can go to because so many people care about it. It's the one time of year where the college football world and the NFL world collide. And it's like this football celebration in a way. But in those circles and the chatter, Rabbit is like 2 thumbs up, man. It's like there's just a lot of talk about the versatility and about how much, and I think some of that, it's like a PR battle, but I think some of that is a lot of what goes on here because he's done so many things that have improved. So, it's not going to be surprising to me if he sneaks into second or third. But I mean, I think realistically, it top 100 is going to tell you somewhere in the third or fourth, ish. So, which is heavy praise, man. I mean, it really is. So, I mean, I wouldn't have, when he came in here, I don't think I'm looking at going, there's like a third or fourth round pick right there, man, in a few years, because it took him, he 5 years here, and like he turned himself into this. Texas Tech helped him, but Rabbit turned himself into this because of the knowledge and the work and the versatility and understanding all the positions on the back end and all that, special teams. He grew up here and matured, had a kid, and just I think is just kind of a fun experience to watch. This is the way it's supposed to work for the student-athlete experience.
Yeah, and I think it all began with great effort. That's where I remember him first splashing on the map as a player, just watching as a fan, is seeing a guy make a play here or there, and it just was rooted in tremendous effort. And that was at the very beginning of his experience, but obviously transitioned into not only just an effort guy, but a guy that, as you're talking about, between the years, from a leadership standpoint and all those things, was really wowing you. I was just pulling up his Rivals recruiting page from once upon a time. Dadrion Taylor Demerson, Midwest City, Oklahoma, running back.
Yeah.
I don't know if folks really remember what his origin story was, but you're looking at some of the offers that he had across the board: Air Force, Arkansas Pine Bluff, SFA, Missouri State, Western Illinois, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, really the most recognizable programs that were offering him a chance to make of this opportunity what he has. So kudos to him for doing that.
Yeah, and don't get it twisted here, but I mean, like, you have to really give credit to, like, I think Matt Wells and Keith Patterson found Rabbit. They pulled him out of Oklahoma. I mean, because Oklahoma City is right up the road from Stillwater, and like that's a big deal when a guy like is like, no man, I'm out. I'm not staying right up the road, because most of those Oklahoma kids, they just want to go to Oklahoma or Oklahoma State, but to get him out of there. And I remember Wells telling me, and maybe it was even Luke Wells involved too, who recruited Oklahoma on Matt's staff, Matt's brother. But they were like, I think he's just a really good football player. If he's playing running back, we see him as a DB, all those kinds of things. But then you credit Joey and his staff and Tim DeRuiter for really developing and squeezing as much out of him. But this is why it's like you just never know. Look at that offer list.
Yeah.
And like we already have our mind made up when we look at that offer list. He'll be okay, whatever. No, this is a third or fourth round draft pick, is what he's turned himself into. Like
you just said, he's leaving the team as the most difficult to replace after his final season. I don't think anybody is projecting that, at least us yokel fans like me who like to look at an offer list and say, okay, who else wanted him? And that's how I'll deduce whether or not I think he'll be a great football player, because, I've never previously heard of him or seen him play a snap. So I'll just go off the offer sheet, which is always a fool's errand. But I'm probably going to do it again this next time around, whenever you sign the next class.
Oh, and the portal offer lists are the same.
That's true. That's
that's all that's looking at it. Well, I mean,
as for like Miles Cole, Tyler Owens, not to denigrate or disrespect them in any way, shape, or form, but they are here because of their measurables. They're here because of God-given gifts. Miles Cole was born huge with a pterodactyl wingspan. Tyler Owens, born huge and can run really, really fast. But I do not view these guys as guys that were playmakers for whatever reason for Texas Tech like I have some others. So I'm very skeptical as to what the future is going to hold. I'm rooting for them and obviously hoping for good things. But I think if they're selected, you could almost step to the podium if you're the commissioner or whoever the celebrity announcer is at that point and say, choosing in the 5th round from Texas Tech, measurables, and then just walk away and call it that, right? But I think about some of the other guys that left Tech who were not in the measurable category, but we knew because of what we saw from them on the field, these guys have a chance. Kerry Hyder, Broderick Washington, Zach McPherson. I mean, guys that were not on that measurables radar at all, but had already proven on the college level, hey, you get them out there on the field, they're going to find a way to make plays for you. And those are guys, obviously, that have stuck around in the National Football League and maybe kind of had to take a circuitous route to get around to having that opportunity. But they're a different category. So I'm really interested to see what happens with Cole and Owens. I guess they're going to get the opportunity. I mean, I guess I'm almost banking on that at this point in time because the National Football League wants to take a shot at guys that look like they do and can do what they can do from a gifted standpoint. But I'm really curious to see where they land and then maybe what they do with that opportunity, because if they do something with it, it's going to be a different story that's going to be written compared to what I think the tale told here in West Texas. Is that fair?
I absolutely agree with you. It's funny you're mentioning some of those names a second ago, and like I saw one Saturday at the Red and Black game, and Antoine Wesley.
That's right.
Tweezy, yeah. And he was a measurables guy, but he kind of lightly recruited, came out of nowhere,
kind of came on late.
Yes,
yeah.
And then like 1,500 yard season later, it's like, damn son, you might be really good at this,
right?
And yeah, he was sitting there telling me about it. He's been in contact with Cliff Kingsbury. I think he's probably actually been in Washington D.C. this week, maybe a new commander, and all those things. But anyway, it's there's a lot of good football players that have come through here, and whether they transferred in or recruited in or highly recruited or lightly recruited, it don't let anybody else write your story, man. You're in charge. Because everybody's running a different race. I think Rabbit is a great example of that. Because everybody would have said, 2 years ago when Miles Cole got here and Rabbit was still here, it's like if you would have had anybody go, who's going to be the higher draft pick? Right. What are most people choosing? I mean, and anyways, I think it's, but Rabbit's real easy. Got to root for. I think I'm curious what your thoughts are on potential highest picks on your current roster.
First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. And you can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs, slam dunks, and all in between, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. So what's the holdup? Get in the mix now on all the action by visiting FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
I'm going to throw a name at you here in a second that you're going to go, who? And I think that's what makes it a lot of fun. But you've got guys that are going to have their name called on your team right now, like a year from now, or 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, right? But I'm curious what your if you have any opinion on, who you kind of have is like maybe the next Rabbit or the next, somebody like that.
I don't know if he'd be the next Rabbit, and it's not going to be next year, but yes, here's my expert breakdown. Micah Mother-Lovin' Hudson. Okay, maybe I won't go there. It'd be a head scratcher for me. I got to be honest. And the guy I'm thinking about in Taj Brooks, unfortunately, plays a position where nobody wants to do anything but make a discount deal for a ball carrier, obviously, when you get to the National Football League. But you'd probably leave me scratching my head, to be honest with you, because I think it'd have to be somebody, from a timeline standpoint where it lines up this way that's kind of maybe off my radar. Is there an obvious one that I'd be missing?
Well, one guy too we didn't mention earlier too about potentially could get called, and this one is Jalen Hutchings. Don't want to gloss over that one.
Sure.
He's got some possibilities there, and there's some others, but like I think you've got some tight ends that could have their name called next year. I really do. I think measurables line up there with Tharp and Conyers, and again, if they have productive years and stay healthy and all those things.
Well, and I remember a mention a few weeks ago, maybe it was another, draft podcast or something like that, something you'd heard, I think, where Conyers is just already put into an NFL kind of context. Like that's the expectation.
I think people feel like he's a professional tight end, but I don't want to gloss over Mason Tharp either, because he actually has a lot more measurables than Conyers does. It's just a matter of these guys being productive and available and healthy and all that. There's just not many guys that I like football wise that I have to go, hey man, good to see you, Mason. But he is one, and that.
Can you play the 5? What are you doing this spring?
That's real. Again, shout out to Mr. Tharp for saying something to me last weekend. I'm not going to gloss over like a Josh Kelly having his name called like next year. I think though that receiver is a bit tricky. He needs to, if he puts up another 1,000-yard type season, I mean, he's certainly somebody.
Yeah.
I think like your Jacob Rodriguez's, your Ben Roberts's, I think have a chance. I think your Dylan Spencer has a chance. He checks some measurables boxes, but these are years from now.
Right.
This is 2 to 3 years away. But here's you one that just got here that I think a lot of people are going to agree with me, especially internally. And maybe I'm reaching a bit, but this is what this stuff is. It's a projection.
Yeah.
I just know that all he lacks is weight and the experience. Everything else he's got. And I think Joey has even like slightly hinted in some of the media availabilities over the spring. And I don't think a lot of people were paying attention just because he's not going to really factor in this year, okay, by design. But I'll be willing to tell you that I think that of your current team, who has a chance to be picked the highest in whatever draft that they end up being in, it's Jacob Ponton, an offensive lineman that just got here. I think he's an offensive tackle. I think he has the potential to be an elite offensive tackle. I think he's already shown them that you have all the athleticism in the world. We just got to put some weight on you and throw you in the fire here in a year or so. And I think the sky is the limit. And that is heavy praise. And I don't want to put too much on somebody like this, but this is a fun conversation to have, not a scary one. But I think that the fact that you potentially a future stud offensive lineman and offensive tackle that you can grow and mold and all that, I think is because I think he really, really impressed a lot of folks internally over the last 3 or 4 weeks. And have we spent a lot of time talking about him? No. Is he going to play this year? Probably not. You hope not. But don't forget about some of these guys that they're recruiting, these top 25 recruiting classes that, again, we get caught up in the shiny new toys that come in from the portal and or a Micah with all the stars. But there's some really good players that are getting brought in here that have a chance to be special. And I think he is going to be one of them.
Really? Okay, so I didn't know if we were playing a game where you just made up a name to see if I noticed or not, but I have confirmed this guy is on the roster, the pride and joy of Dripping Springs, Texas.
Yep.
6'8", 280 or so is what they're listed him as. So, all right, somebody to keep an eye on.
Does that check the measurables box?
As they say, a frame that has a chance to be filled out, right? And we'll rely on the strength and conditioning staff to do just that. Fun stuff to kind of think about what might be coming down the pipeline down the road, but also excited to see what's coming up this weekend for those guys that we've mentioned as well. Let us know who's on your radar out there in the YouTube comments, where you see it the same or maybe where you see it differently. All right, we're back on the other side to wrap up the week, Chris. Looking forward to it, man. Appreciate the time as always.
Guns up. Keep hope alive, people. Enjoy draft day. Shout out to Kevin Costner and Jennifer Garner out there, man. It was a phenomenal film. Kind of, but it was
the same without Jennifer Garner in the mix.
No, probably not. But it was Dennis Leary. But it was draft day,
Yeah.
And that's what today is. So it's like George Costanza used to say, my worlds are colliding. But yeah, NFL, college, here you go. In Detroit, Michigan, downtown Detroit is where they're on the scene for the next 3 days.
That's right. Shout out to Bobby Bear. And I think the recruiting profile for Jennifer Garner also said a frame we can work with. And that has come to fruition. Chris, enjoyed it as always. Appreciate you guys for being out there. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. And we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.